to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, here we go. How is everybody? Hi, Angela. Nice to see you, Brooke. Brooke always has the funniest comments. Kitties, 1993. Always lovely to see you. Marianne Nizzo. Boy, did we get a wowzer of a filing from the Commonwealth today. It's the list, potential witnesses. Now, of course, usually my experience has been in trials that not everyone is called who's on these lists. If you remember, the defense had a huge list last time round. And now they say they're going to bring 12 more witnesses, the defense. But we've seen the Commonwealth's list, and on it are two very shocking things. So, and I'm going to talk about them one after the other, but first is Turtle Boy. Aiden Turtle Boy Carney is on the list, which makes him a witness, meaning until he can't be in the courtroom until after he testifies. And that is a big help. His presence was certainly felt in the first trial. If you believe Ronnie, the EMT juror, who is really like squeezing every last drop out of his 15 minutes of fame. He's been on everything and been on every show in a pink shirt and a pink bow tie, looking like a free Karen Read goon. But if you believe what Ronnie, the EMT juror, said, was that people on the jury knew who Turtle Boy was filling in the other jurors on some of the backstory. So you couldn't have missed Aiden Carney's presence. And I thought it was a terrible decision by the judge to allow him in the courtroom when it's being streamed on TV. Certainly it's not getting in the way of his First Amendment rights to report on the trial. He can watch the whole thing on court TV, et cetera, et cetera. But to have witnesses there who were harassed by him, and really it all came from Karen Read, but you can't remove Karen Read from the courtroom. So I thought it was a terrible decision to have him there watching the witnesses' testimony. And it certainly, I felt, changed their testimony. All of a sudden, everybody was in love with Karen Read, who testified. Oh, we all loved her. We thought she was great. Not we thought she was great. And now, considering her actions, I have some doubts. I look back and I wonder what red flags I could have missed. No, that wasn't the testimony. The testimony was she was great. We loved her. We thought she was a good match for John. They were lovey-dovey, which echoes exactly the text messages from John O'Keefe to Karen Read. I'm not as quick to get lovey-dovey with you again. It seemed like, to my eye, that the witnesses were afraid of the free Karen readers, and there were so many of them first time round, and they were limited to, they were allowed to be very close to the courthouse. Was it 200 yards? It was too close. And then to have Karen Read do these press conferences every day after court, I mean, she really gamed the court system with that. So I think that's certainly a positive. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what questions might come up depending on what discovery, what's going to be allowed in this as an evidence meaning the text messages is Beverly Cannoni going to allow the text messages between Aidan Carney and Karen Read to show consciousness of guilt, to show a joint venture, that they were they were involved in a conspiracy to, I would call it, pervert the course of justice. A gentler way to put it would be to point fingers at anyone else but Karen Read, and to get an alternative story going that they couldn't argue in court because it has such no basis in reality. There's no evidence for it. I mean, they couldn't even develop a third-party culprit. They did bring it into court, really crossing the line. Judge Cannoni said you could bring in the third-party culprit, meaning you could point the fingers at someone else, but you have to develop it in cross-examination. They never developed it. And in opening statement, David Yanetti's talking about how Karen Read was framed. I mean, just crossing the line. Sure, you're not pointing the fingers at someone particular, but you're putting out the idea that there was a conspiracy done by other people, when in fact the only conspiracy in this case was done by Karen Read, her lying lawyers, with the aiding of blogger Aidan Carney and our press, who happily joined in and supported it. And my theory on the case, or on Gretchen Voss, we talked about her last, who wrote the Boston Magazine article. This is just a theory, I can't prove it, is that Karen Read's lawyers went to Gretchen Voss with that story. And we can look at Gretchen Voss's story in a little bit, but it tore the town apart. Had it really torn the town apart before Gretchen Voss and before the media? Second person on the witness list is part of Karen Read's family. And this is someone who I was very anxious to hear from. One is, of course, Karen Read's biological sister. She's nowhere to be found, nowhere to be seen. It's hard to, most people don't even know that Karen Read has a sister, younger sister. She seems to want no part in supporting her sister or being part of the family interviews that the Karen Read's dad, brother, and mother all take part in. But Karen Read's sister-in-law, Kaitlin Boudreau Read, hasn't been seen in court in a long time. What does she know? What did she see that morning? So I'm just going to go over Innocence Fraud Watch. Wrote a blog about Kaitlin, and then we're going to look at the entire perspective list for the Commonwealth. But Here we go, starting with killer. Karen Read retrial. The Commonwealth have subpoenaed Kaitlin Boudreau Read, wife of brother and thief and fraudster Nathan Read. Will she give their innocence fraud scam away? I just don't see her lying. I see if I can imagine William Read lying on the stand for his daughter. I can imagine Nathan Read lying on the stand for his sister. I can imagine Karen Read's mother lying on the stand for her, but not Kaitlin. Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan has indicated in court filings that he will be subpoenaing William Joseph Read and Nathan Read to give evidence during Karen Read's second 2025 murder trial. Read more here. He will also be subpoenaing Kaitlin Boudreau Read. Kaitlin, the wife of Nathan Read, brother of killer Karen Read, only appears to have attended a couple of her sister-in-law's pretrial hearings. Kaitlin appeared absent from Karen Read's first 2024 trial for her murder. Kaitlin Boudreau Read worked at Bridgewater State University, where innocent state witness Colin Albert went to school. On January 29th, 2022, Kaitlin went to the Good Samaritan Hospital with her husband, Nathan Read, and his father, William Read, her father-in-law, to pick up Karen Read. The four of them headed to John O'Keefe's house in Canton. Around lunchtime, early afternoon, Kaitlin Boudreau Read was caught on Ring camera in the driveway of One Meadows Avenue, inspecting the smashed to smithereens right rear taillight of her sister-in-law's black Lexus SUV. What conversations were had by Nathan Read and his wife Kaitlin that morning? And what conversations have been had since? Will Kaitlin Boudreau Read come clean and do the right thing? So here's her suspicious behavior below. Can everybody see it? Okay. Everybody remember this? Did you guys see that? She's like mesmerized by it. Her gaze, let's watch it again. Her gaze certainly looking at Karen Read's taillight. It's like she's mesmerized by it. Oh, gotta wipe off the left taillight, but not the right. Leave that one covered in snow, Nathan. So that's a very telling little piece of footage there. And Innocence Fraud Watch asked the question, does wife of Nathan Read smirk about her sister-in-law's behavior? So here's Nathan Read in court.
Essentially, when she's arrested and during the booking process at the Milton State Police Barracks, the troopers who conducted that arrest were wearing a body-worn camera pursuant to their BWC policy with the state police. Council has a copy of the policy, council has a copy of the video, and essentially there are a number of different statements which provide sort of third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I'm not sure what number we're up to at this point, of sort of varying accounts that the defendant has provided to numerous
Can you give me an idea now? Do you know the substance?
So the substance of these particular statements is the defendant, Ms. Reed, continuously is told by Sergeant Buchanan to essentially stop talking. He's advised her of her Miranda and advised her to stop making statements, and repeatedly states that to her during the course of her making statements. But the sum and substance of it is she says something to the effect of, you know, are you in on the joke? And then makes some sort of reference to having witnessed Brian Albert and Colin Albert essentially.
Does everybody remember that? We're all in on the same joke, right? Colin Albert and Brian Albert. Does everybody remember that? And John's face was pulverized. Look at Nathan Reed. He thinks it's hilarious.
To the effect of, you know, are you in on the joke? And then make some sort of reference to having witnessed Brian Albert and Colin Albert essentially smash John O'Keefe's head into the taillight, indicating that that's how her taillight was broken.
So Nathan Reed seems to be in on the joke himself there.
What's your plan when a dangerous black...
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to avoid it. But curious, right? Interesting. Here's the witness list, prospective witness list. The civilian witnesses: Brian Albert Jr., Kaitlin Albert, Chris Albert, Colin Albert, Julie Albert, Nicole Albert, Stephen Bernstein, keeper of record. Kaitlin Boudreau, there she is, number 9. Michael Camerano. Is Michael Camerano going to finally tell what he told others before this, that John O'Keefe was upset that Karen Reed didn't ask him to, and his father, who was a plumber, to help her with her hot water issue? He was annoyed. That didn't make it in. Somehow he edited that out of his testimony in trial. Is Michael Camerano going to talk about that? Katie Camerano. And is Hank Brennan going to ask about Richie the plumber, Karen Reed's plumbing tale? Richard Damano, Jean DeMollis, keeper of record, Brian Higgins, Louis Jetras, KF, juvenile, so John O'Keefe's niece and nephew, PF, juvenile, Aiden Carney, number 18. So what this really means is Hank Brennan's taking no prisoners. When did you first meet Karen Reed? And when did you what did you tell us about the rolling? I don't know how broad it's going to be. But I think a reasonable jury could conclude that an innocent person on trial would not start pointing fingers and harassing witnesses in their own case, pointing fingers and accusing everyone and anyone of the crime that they are accused of doing, charged with doing, going on trial for. Wouldn't an innocent person say, it feels so horrible to be falsely accused and have to go to trial? And according to her, go broke. I don't believe she is going broke for something she didn't do, but she wants to do it to other people. And not only that, she wants to make their life miserable and have a pitchforky mob follow them wherever they go. I think a reasonable jury would conclude that that's the behavior of someone with a need to not argue their case in court or show an alternate theory in court, but to create an alternate narrative in the court of public opinion. Paul O'Keefe, Aaron O'Keefe. Okay, here we go. Sarah Levinson, Heather Maxon, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Bridget Meacham, keeper of record, Julie Nagel, Ryan Nagel, Paul O'Keefe, Aaron O'Keefe, Nathan Reed, William Reed, and will Hank Brennan ask for William Reed's phone records again? Judge said no, but she left it open to ask again. Kurt Roberts, Carrie Roberts, Steve Scanlon. So do you guys remember who Steve Scanlon is? Hold on one sec. Steve Scanlon was someone who worked in, I believe it was law enforcement somehow. And he thought he was reading Turtle Boy. And he thought he had a tip for Yannetti, or he thought, he thought he could help out David Yannetti, but he didn't know anything about this alleged conspiracy that took place in 34 Fairview Road. So he handed back the retainer money in a check that Yannetti gave him. Wouldn't that be a fascinating interview? Laura Sullivan, Marietta Sullivan sisters. We're going to hear about Aruba again. Rebecca Trayers, Michael Trotta, Gretchen Voss. That will be fascinating. What will Gretchen Voss say? Did Boston Magazine assign her the story? Or did she go to Boston Magazine with the story and sold it to them because she had been approached by Karen Read's defense team? Why was Karen Read's defense team telling Gretchen Voss things that they weren't supposed to tell her, that was against the law to tell her, and told her not to publish it until it came out in a filing, that they could get the information out in an unrelated filing? And that's how they've run this innocence fraud campaign, leaking out information in filings. So the filings really aren't about what they're about a lot of the time. It's just getting out falsehoods into the public domain to fire up the free Karen readers and to expand their innocence fraud campaign, the power of it. Canton Fire Department, law enforcement. You're going to see first responders again, I would think. Needham Police Department, State Police, Forensic Laboratory witnesses, State Crime Laboratory witnesses, expert witnesses. Colleen Crawford, Norfolk District Attorney's Office, James Crosby, Robert Gilman, Jessica Hyde's coming back, Gary Fowler, MD, Good Samaritan Hospital, Andrew Klain from Aperture, Mike Maroli from Aperture, Justin Rice from South Shore Hospital, Renee Stonebridge. So that's interesting. Do we see the first responders on here? The EMTs? Yeah, Anthony Flamati, Katie McLaughlin. Yep. I would think that with all the statements of Karen Read, I think some of this will be edited down. I can't imagine them calling all of these witnesses, but maybe. Julie Nagel, Ryan Nagel, I mentioned that. It is very much like the first trial, but now we have Karen Read's own statements in the press. You said this here, you said this here. You said this here, you said this here. Do you think Karen Read's going to take the stand? Curious to know who thinks Karen Read's going to take the stand. I'm going to do a poll. I don't think so. I think she'll continue doing, if I had to guess, I think she's going to continue to do her, she's going to continue to do her post-court pressers walking to her car. But I don't think she would ever, she doesn't have it's all about power and control for Karen Read. And on the stand, she's out of control. She doesn't have the control. She only has the control when her lawyers are asking her questions, not when Hank Brennan asks her questions. And it would be a terrible thing to do. It would be unwise because she's guilty and she's lying, in my opinion. But the issue with calling Aidan Carney is that his trial doesn't start till June. So once he's asked questions about his relationship with Karen Read, et cetera, he is now locked in to those statements and to that story and can't change it. So, which doesn't sound terrible if you're telling the truth, it's not a problem. But if you want to minimize and lie, it is a big problem. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break. Hi, Manny. There are clips of the first trial being presented as recent events with quotes that describe how the defense is tearing apart the cops or McCabe's. This is being promoted via YouTube, algorithm, and search. Love you. Thank you. Wow. So they're presenting clips of the first trial as recent events with quotes that describe how the defense is tearing apart the cops or McCabe's. Well, I guess they have to do something because now that it's pretty much been cemented that the federal investigation is over, they have to do something, right? Because the big refrain was that the feds are coming any minute. Now that they're not coming, it's that the defense team is really going to expose the witnesses in this case and bring down the cops. Speaking of, Michael Proctor is talk about that. Also talk about Gretchen Voss and her extremely edited interviews of Karen Read, or the unedited interviews are coming in. I think this is going to be explosive in trial. That's my feeling. I think that little, so there was a little footnote on the bottom of Judge Cannoni's filing talking about how Alan Jackson told Gretchen Voss at the Omni Hotel that he wasn't supposed to tell her this information, but he could release it in a filing. And don't go to print with the information that he was telling her, even though it was against the law to tell her. He was going to tell her anyway, just wait for the filing, and he'd get the information out in the filing. I think the relationship between Aidan Carney, Karen Read, I mean, we know the relationship from, I went through it last time, and her lawyers, but the relationship between Gretchen Voss hasn't really been explored. Why was Alan Jackson so eager to break his oath he took, being a lawyer, to break the law, to give Gretchen Voss that information? And why is Gretchen Voss's narrative of this case the narrative that both sides stick to so closely? I think it's going to be devastating for Gretchen Voss. I think that Gretchen Voss agreed to, I think they went to Gretchen Voss and she kicked off this innocence fraud campaign. And when it started to get, she was right there at the rolling rally. When it started to get exposed, she, went under the radar. Why was she so friendly with Aidan Carney? Why was, according to Gretchen Voss, why were the O'Keeffes giving her dirty looks? What did they know? Why was she getting a dirty look from John O'Keeffe's friends? Why were they giving her dirty looks? What did they know about her relationship with the defense and Karen Read? I hope she does testify. She certainly fought tooth and nail to keep her unedited interviews out of the public domain and her notes. I cared less about her notes than I do the unedited interviews and all the comments that, how do you think Judge Cannoni knows about that comment that Alan Jackson made off the record on tape? It's in the unedited. I would think it was in the unedited tapes. I can't prove it. I don't know for sure, but I would think so. All right, I will be taking a quick break. I will be back. Actually, you know what? I'll just play my Alan Jackson song. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so yes, whoever asked, there is rule, it goes against the rules of the profession to bed your client. after they're no longer your client, it's a little bit like being a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Wanted to show you there is a new merchandise as asked for. Let me show you. Hold on, I have to cough. So, Karen Read, this is one of my more favorites. There is the Brennan Lally McLaughlin 2025. And of course, the back says Convict Karen Read. That's one of my more favorites. Tank top, stickers, my logos, lots of different stuff with my logo. Also so they turn it around when you first make these. A House Long Until Karen Read's Convicted t-shirt with Convict Karen Read on the back. And then there's the classic, the Convict Karen Read t-shirt. Who doesn't want that in a variety of styles? Come on. Right? Who doesn't want to Convict Karen Read sweatshirt? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to wear that to court? I don't know. So mugs, etc. So that is a little update on that. Also, just wanted to show you. This is from John DePetro's show. Family of lead investigator in Karen Read case speaks out, calling on public to look at the facts of the case. The family of Michael Proctor, the lead investigation in the murder case that left a beloved Boston police officer dead, is finally speaking out and accusing the defense of using Proctor to deflect from overwhelming evidence against Karen Read. March 12, 2025, in light of the egregiously false statements from Karen Read and her defense team, both inside and outside the courtroom, Michael Proctor's family is speaking out for the first time to address the ongoing misrepresentations of his character and calling for the public to actually look at the facts of this case. On January 29, 2022, 14 minutes before his on-call shift was due to end, Michael Proctor was assigned to an unattended death case, and his life was forever changed. Proctor and the other investigators followed the evidence, and a jury of the defendant's peers indicted Read, and only Read, for the murder of Officer John O'Keefe. Despite this, the family says Michael Proctor has been defamed, maligned, and falsely labeled corrupt by the alleged murderer, her family, her defense team, and a mob of her followers. Through unrelenting propaganda and disinformation, the defense is trying this case in the court of public opinion and painting Karen Read as the victim with the hopes of tainting a jury pool. At the end of the day, a beloved police officer and honorable man was killed. The prosecution believes it's an open and shut case, and the defense knows this too. So their tactic is to put my husband, the lead investigator. So weren't both of them lead investigators? I mean, didn't they have weren't they a team? Or was Buchanan more junior to Proctor? Just asking. I always thought of them as a team. Their tactic is to put my husband, the lead investigator, on trial for sending text messages on his personal phone to his friends and family, said Proctor's wife, Elizabeth Proctor. The Karen Read defense team is unabashedly creating false narratives and distracting the public and potential jurors from clear-cut evidence. I would say they're not distracting the public. I'd say they're poisoning the jury pool and propagandizing the public, but okay. It was recently announced that all aspects of the federal investigation involving this case had been closed or has been closed. Michael Proctor, who has an unblemished police record in his 12 years with the Massachusetts State Police, testified that the texts on his personal phone were unprofessional and regrettable, but certainly didn't affect the integrity of the investigation. Quote, Michael and so many others in his line of work see horrible things every day and may at times need to vent personally. He saw a fellow officer die a horrible, tragic death. Who among us has not said something regrettable in moments of stress, shock, or sadness? And how would you feel if the contents of your personal phone were questionably released to the public without full context, says Courtney Proctor, Proctor's sister. Well, the problem with that, though, I mean, I've defended Michael Proctor. I've said that if I did this kind of crime, I would expect the police officer to write those same kind of things about me. However, I don't think that there's any context besides working, a late night. He was working, really long shifts in a nor'easter over, trying to shore up all the evidence in a horrible crime with a very unlikable suspect, let's say that. I don't think there is anything. With that said, I don't think there is anything that would give those statements context. Like, oh, well, now I understand why he called her a see you next Tuesday or whatever he called her, or talked about her weird Fall River accent or her body or whatever. And no, he was not looking for nudes. He was asked if there were nudes on her phone, and he said he hadn't found any. That is not looking for. That's it. The defense loves to go to town. It drives me crazy with that. Unfortunately, we know that by speaking out, more harassment will be unleashed on our family, but we can no longer stand by and silently watch Michael's character be attacked and disparaged so unfairly. After exhaustive investigations at both the state and federal level and a grand jury. And this is, this brings up the point as to why I think every witness who got on the stand only said great things about Karen Read. No one had any clue that she might be the kind of person who would say, burn their, if the rumor's true or even not true, burn their ex-boyfriend's car, set it on fire, or threaten their ex with a knife, or clip their police officer boyfriend going 24 miles an hour in reverse, their foot 75% down on the gas pedal, never once touching the brake, with their infotainment system beeping and flashing at them that they were going to hit something. No one said, oh, well, I saw this, or I saw that, or I saw flashes of anger, or I saw rage, or I saw a relationship where she was coercively controlling John O'Keefe. I think everyone was afraid to have the Free Karen Read mob descend on them. So everyone only said nice things. That colored all the testimony. Unfortunately, we know, okay, after exhaustive investigations at both the state and federal level and a grand jury, only one person has been charged with a crime, the defendant, Karen Read, said Elizabeth Proctor. So Aidan Carney says, Michael Proctor sees horrible things every day and may at times need to vent personally. Michael Proctor is not a detective, is a detective, not a cop or a paramedic. This is so ill-informed. Has he ever met a detective? Has anyone ever talked to cops or detectives? They'll be like, oh, you know the smell of death. Have you ever smelled the smell of death? No. They see horrendous things. And most cop have, offer mental health support because it's such a stressful, horrifying job. He arrives at crime scenes long after the crime has taken place. He doesn't pull people out of car wrecks, perform CPR on a dying victim, and didn't even go to 34 Fairview Road. On January 29, 2022, a lot of first responders do see unspeakable things. But on the job that can lead them with PTSD, Michael Proctor is not one of them. He sent the text messages about looking for naked pictures of Karen Read 6 months after John O'Keefe's body was found. It's not how it went, but okay. Not how it went down, but okay, as John O'Keefe said to Karen Read. And this was curious. Richard Schoenstein, this lawyer is like a shill for Karen Read. I'm sure this ordeal has been horrible for Michael Proctor and his family, but the texts were not just unprofessional but regrettable. Really? What were they, criminal? Lawyer Schoenstein? What were they? They demonstrated prejudice and bias that have no place in a police investigation and which have compromised an investigation. How so? How would it be any different if he loved Karen Read? And which had compromised an investigation into the death of a police officer and the prosecution of Karen Read. The family press release may or may not be a violation of the court's gag order, but I don't think it was a good idea. With less than 3 weeks to trial, well, my understanding is just the lawyers have a gag order. Karen Read's still talking. With less than 3 weeks to trial, witnesses, potential witnesses, and those associated with them should refrain from public comment. How about Karen Read? Should she refrain from public comment? Rich Schoenstein? Hopefully the retrial will yield a decisive result, and then anyone can say anything they want. So hopefully Karen Read will get acquitted or get maybe convicted of some very small charge, and then anyone can say whatever they want. And answering back, Julie on X says, spend some time thinking about how they got them, Rich, how a murder defendant got communications and an iCloud info for anyone who had been in that house that night that had been denied in state court. You're looking on the surface and you keep missing what's underneath because you discount the federal investigation. The story is going to come out sooner or later, and it's worse than you think. Curious, huh? Interesting. So, Gretchen Voss, I got about halfway through this last time, and I'm just going to Innocent Fraud Watch's blog. So here's Gretchen Voss in the blue pants, watching the pink shirted Free Karen readers and the blue John O'Keefe supporters. But to quote John Collins, who's been a guest on this podcast, wrote the Crime Lab report all about basically the innocence fraud. It's an academic book about innocence fraud. A common thread in many exonerations is the use of willing journalists to front load a post-conviction investigation with the construction of a compelling innocence narrative. Indeed, this can be a problem in typical criminal investigations where the press jumps to conclusions about a suspect's guilt But in post-conviction litigation, the passage of time makes it far easier to sell the alternative story as being legitimate. Or pre-conviction, if you just saturate the public and press with your narrative, that becomes the narrative. Hence, Gretchen Voss's narrative. Okay, the same applies to willing journalists who choose to shill for accused killers, especially when their case has yet to be tried in a court of law. So here's this interesting footnote, compelling footnote, Judge Beverly Cannoni wrote on the bottom of her memorandum of decision and order on Commonwealth motion to impose sanctions. The court also notes that Attorney Jackson had a conversation with Gretchen Voss at the Omni Seaport Hotel, which he revealed information that had been turned over by the Commonwealth in discovery, but had not yet been made public. In that discussion, Attorney Jackson acknowledged to the reporter that he was not yet permitted to disclose the information he had received in discovery, and told her she could not publicly disseminate the information until it was put in a court motion. So here's Gretchen Voss at the rolling rally where they're going from house to house to house, the McCabe's, the Proctors, and screaming at them and calling them murderers. Gretchen Voss took part in that. But Gretchen Voss, so in her article, she writes, as the band played, the mood was festive and upbeat. O'Keefe downed beers while Read drank vodka sodas, lots of them. Karen Read told Gretchen Voss during a recorded interview on July 13th, 2023, that she did not drink at the Waterfall Bar. According to an October 2024 renewed motion by the Commonwealth, Karen Read had stated to Gretchen, I didn't drink there. Karen also stated, but I didn't really drink at the second bar. I just socialized. Why didn't Gretchen Voss tell her readers that Karen Read had denied drinking alcohol at the Waterfall Bar? And in previous interviews with Gretchen Voss on June 20th, 2023, Karen Read had lied and stated that she had like a vodka tonic every 40 minutes. Surveillance camera footage from C.F. McCarthy's evidences the fact that Karen Read was drinking a vodka unit on average one every 12 minutes. Gretchen Voss also states, when the clock ticked to midnight, it was nearly last call. The night wasn't over, though. Brian Albert announced he was headed home to have a beer with his son for his birthday and invited the group to join. O'Keefe wanted to keep the party going. Read, tired, buzzed, and hungry, was less sure, but agreed to at least give him a ride. On the way out, O'Keefe grabbed a half-full cocktail glass off the table, took a slug, and carried the rest of the drink out the door with him. Someone left me a comment about this and said that they thought this was John O'Keefe, the glass he was holding, which was Read's half-full cocktail glass, was him taking away the alcohol from her, and that might have caused the rage. That was I hadn't thought of that theory, but a partial transcript from the Commonwealth's renewed motion for all audio recording, interviews, notes, emails, text messages, and voicemails in the possession of Gretchen Voss or MetroCorp suggests Gretchen Voss was the architect of the word buzzed. And is the level of intoxication pretty high here for everyone? Gretchen asked Karen Read. Karen Read says, it's happy. Gretchen Voss says, yeah. Karen Read says, Gretchen Voss says, because you had a lot to drink, right? Karen Read, I wouldn't say I'd had like a normal amount. Gretchen Voss, what's normal? Karen Read, like a vodka tonic every 40 minutes. Gretchen Voss, okay, so you're like feeling like buzzed? And I'm not judging you, I'm just trying to get a sense. Karen Read, yeah, buzzed. So it's curious because all the text messages before this show that, you know, between Karen Read and John O'Keefe saying, if you're jonesing to drink, go and drink. But Karen Read wanted to go to D&E Pizza, but that doesn't mean she wouldn't have drank there. She certainly was adept at bringing a drink from one place to the next. We saw her put a drink under her coat from one bar and take it to the next bar. She could have had a bottle of booze in her car. We don't know. But the fact that, and this is something Ronnie, the juror, mentioned, that he basically was victim blaming and saying, well, it was John O'Keefe who wanted to keep the party going and keep drinking. This all comes from Gretchen Voss's story. Because what came out in court is that he really admired Brian Albert and wanted to continue socializing, but there certainly wasn't, I didn't hear in any of the testimony that alcohol was the motivating factor for John O'Keefe. The full cocktail glass referred to by Gretchen was the vodka soda drink John O'Keefe had purchased for Karen at 11:58 p.m. John was seen on surveillance camera carrying this drink out of the bar to Karen at 12:11 a.m. Did Karen Read claim to Gretchen that John O'Keefe wanted to keep the party going? The evidence suggests it was Karen who wanted to keep the party going. Maybe John O'Keefe wanted to go home because it was he who was tired. Why did Gretchen Voss fail to quote Karen Read or cite her sources? And did Gretchen Voss bother to ask Karen Read what she eventually ate? If, as was her alleged in her story, Karen was hungry, some witnesses said that Karen Read had pestered Chris Albert to open his D&E Pizza shop, which was located nearby, but Chris refused. Did Karen Read feel slighted by Chris Albert's refusal? And where did Karen Read agree to at least give him a ride come from? There was no need for Karen to give John O'Keefe a ride. He could have gone with Matthew and Jennifer McCabe. Gretchen Voss also states, Read sat behind the wheel and O'Keefe plugged the address 34 Fairview Road into Waze before they drove off. John O'Keefe did not plug the address 34 Fairview Road into Waze until 12:20, which was around 6 minutes after they drove off. Why would John O'Keefe text Jennifer McCabe at 12:14 a.m. where to? Around 3 minutes after walking out of the bar. And this is something Ronnie, the jury, he wrote, he typed in 34 Fairview Road, meaning he sealed his fate because of his need to keep the party going. He wanted to go, he may have just gone in for a quick, stayed 20 minutes and left. We don't know. He never made it in the door, so we don't know. Why would John O'Keefe tell Jennifer McCabe at 12:14 a.m. where to, around 3 minutes after walking out of the bar? And as Karen Read pulled out of her parking spot on Washington Street, if he already knew the address before they drove off? Who was Gretchen Voss's source regarding the timing of the Waze search? Or was this her or her amazing fact checkers' assumptions? Omissions. Like innocent fraudsters before her, Gretchen Voss chose to omit crucial material facts from her story told her by Karen Read. For example, when she interviewed Karen Read on the 20th of June, 2023, Karen Read had stated, so I pulled up to the front of the driveway, so I'm parallel to the house. John gets out of the passenger side. John doesn't have a coat on. It's snowing, and he kind of half skips, runs to the breezeway door. How do you half skip? How do you half skip and then run? half skip and run. And this is from her imagination. Runs up to the breezeway door, the area connected to the main house, to the garage, and John open the door and starts to cross the threshold. Why didn't Voss consider niece and her pivotal evidence? Gretchen Voss states several hours later, around 4:30, Read says she woke up alone in the same clothes from the evening before on the couch at O'Keefe's house. John O'Keefe's 14-year-old niece, KF, said she's woken up by Karen Read at 4:30 a.m. before Karen would have been awake. Therefore, Karen would have been awake before 4:30. So Karen Read came into the room and just shook her and left. Why didn't Gretchen Voss ask Karen Read why she didn't call John O'Keefe's phone as soon as she woke up? Why did Karen Read first wake KF at around 4:30 a.m. and then wait until 8 minutes later before calling John's phone at 4:38 and 16 seconds? Excuse me. Why didn't Gretchen Voss consider John's niece KF and her pivotal evidence? The following excerpt is from the wrongful death filing by the O'Keefe family. At approximately 4:30, defendant Read knew that she had hit JJ with her SUV. Nevertheless, she woke up JJ's 14-year-old niece, KF, and talked about JJ's death, talked about hitting JJ with her SUV, and otherwise involved KF in her frantic calls about JJ's death. At all relevant times on or about January 29th, 2022, defendant Read knew that Kaylee was a vulnerable minor who had already lost her parents tragically and depended on her custodial uncle JJ, who became her surrogate parent. Read first thought to call her parents. Read said she thought to call McCabe to ask if she'd seen O'Keefe. Read didn't have her number, but she knew that O'Keefe's niece, who was close friends with Jen McCabe's daughter, probably did. In a panic, Read woke her up and had her dial Jennifer McCabe, who said she had no idea where John O'Keefe was either. In reality, Karen first thought to call her parents, William Read and Janet Read. Her first call to them was at 1:14 a.m. This call was unanswered. After allegedly waking up, she made a second call to them at 4:38. This too was unanswered. Karen Read called them a third time at 4:42 a.m. During her first 2024 trial for murder, Trooper Guarino testified that this call was answered. Below are extracts of Trooper Guarino evidence in chief. Karen also instructed John's niece to call her uncle John's phone, which KF did at around 4:44 a.m. It was 9 more minutes before Jennifer McCabe was contacted. When Karen Read called Catherine Camerano, Karen Read also called Michael Camerano several times and phoned Michael Camerano's wife, Catherine Camerano, at 4:49 a.m. When Karen Read called Catherine Camerano, she apparently repeatedly said to her, "Where's Mike?" and stated John didn't come home. Why didn't Gretchen Voss include any of these key facts in her story, especially the crucial evidence of John O'Keefe's niece, KF? Why the focus on the call with Jennifer McCabe? And Gretchen Voss goes on to falsely state of Jennifer McCabe. McCabe hung up and called Chris Albert's wife, Julie, who lived just a few doors down from O'Keefe, to ask if he had passed out at their house. Again, husband and wife, Chris and Julie Albert, no longer lived just a few doors down from John O'Keefe. They had moved the previous year. And Jennifer McCabe had ended her call to Julie Albert before Julie answered. So then there's the issue of the taillight. There's a second call after KF's, John's niece, 4:53 3 call to Jennifer McCabe, whereby Jennifer McCabe called Kaylee's phone back, or KF called Jennifer back. This call was made around 4:56. This is the call in which Jennifer told Karen that she and her husband, Matthew McCabe, had seen her and John, her black Lexus XUV, outside her sister's house. This is also the call in which Karen said to Jennifer that she didn't remember going there and started yelling, "Jen, Jen," and then said, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" And proceeded to tell Jennifer and inadvertently Matthew that she had smashed her taillight to smithereens. Catherine Camerano also called Karen at 4:56. So this is way before the 5:08 love tap. It was during this call, which lasted 2 minutes and 57 seconds, in which Catherine also heard her daughter's basketball coach, Jennifer McCabe, in the background. Why were these facts omitted from Gretchen Voss' story? Karen Read's story to Gretchen Voss rings hollow, especially given the fact that John O'Keefe had told Karen in a message just a few hours referring to Michael Camerano, "I'm relying on you for a ride home if he leaves." How is John O'Keefe planning to get home to his niece, especially if Karen Read was not supposed to stay in Canton? What arrangements were made for John to get home when Karen allegedly decided to leave him before he stepped out of the car? Why did Gretchen Voss choose to omit so many crucial facts from her story? So, hold on one second, guys. Okay. So, Karen Read had first called Carrie Roberts at 4:59. The call was missed because Carrie was asleep. When Karen called Carrie Roberts a second time at 5 a.m. on the dot, she had screamed, "John's dead. Carrie, Carrie." Carrie did not get a chance to say anything to Karen because straight after she screamed, "John's dead. Carrie, Carrie, Carrie," Karen hung up the phone. In Gretchen Voss' story, she gives the impression that approximately 5:35 a.m. meeting at Jennifer McCabe's house was prearranged, when the reality appears to have been very different. Karen Read had told Carrie Roberts she was heading to her house, but she had kept Carrie waiting and did not bother to show up. Was this because Carrie had told Karen she was calling the police? During a March 5th, 2025 motions hearing, prosecutor Hank Brennan referred to the interview Gretchen Voss carried out with Karen Read on June 20th, 2023. Reading from the transcript of the recorded interview, Hank Brennan said that Karen Read had stated, when my car was seized, there was a few small pieces of taillight missing that I picked out of John's at 5:45 before we drove over to Fairview. Look what I just did to my light. And I'm worried that there's going to be some kind of electric short circuit. There's like the bulb is showing and some of the red plastic is missing. So I picked pieces out of the light housing that kind of collapsed within the light, and I dropped them in John's driveway. Why was the above omitted from Gretchen Voss's story? Voss's Boston Magazine story reads, Read raced towards him, dropped to her knees beside him, and frantically cleared the snow off his torso. Dropped to her knees beside him and frantically cleared the snow off his torso? You know, she straddled him, and then she raised her shirt up and raised his shirt up and was like grinding on him. And I can't remember who yelled it at her, but you're not helping. She wasn't helping. She was doing a performance to save her own skin. As they waited for the ambulance, Read repeatedly cried out McCabe and Carrie Roberts' name over and over. Why didn't Karen Read repeatedly cry out for John O'Keefe? And so the story's meant to evoke sympathy. And Gretchen Voss stated she called her doctor and asked for medication to help her sleep. She had also located an attorney, David Yannetti, online and retained his services. When did Karen Read communicate with her alleged plumber? So the plumber was supposed to come back mañana, but instead she's calling DUI lawyers and doing Google search for DUI lawyers. And during a pre-recorded Innocence Fraud TV show, which aired on September 6, 2024, Karen Read stated of John O'Keefe's mother, I could sense from her that she was looking at me very wearily. I said, Dad, come upstairs to the master bedroom. And I said, I think I need to leave. I said, I think John's mother thinks I did something to John. And when Matt Gutman, the host of the TV show, asked Karen Read, at what point on Saturday did you have the wherewithal to think maybe I needed an attorney? Karen Read stated, as soon as I interacted with John's mother at John's house. I think John's mother always knew that Karen Read was capable and a dark character, capable of something like this. Mother's instincts. When we were driving home, I said to my father, I got to get an attorney. But Karen Read had first interacted with John's mother earlier in the morning, referring to somewhere around 7:25 a.m. Carrie Roberts testified that Karen Read had called her repeatedly, seemingly from ambulance 2, while she was on her way to Good Samaritan Hospital under Section 12 protective order to save her from ending it all. What a joke, which she immediately recovered from and got out of that hospital so quickly. And also when she had arrived at the hospital, Karen called me repeatedly. This is Carrie Roberts saying, asking me if I was going to come to the hospital. Then she called when the O'Keefes were in the car, and she said she dropped him off at a party. And Mrs. O'Keefe said, you just left him? And Mr. O'Keefe said, leave her alone. She's been through enough. Gretchen Voss's story goes on. Yannetti didn't know what to think. Was this even plausible? He thought about the people at the after party that night. Brian Albert, the homeowner, was a prominent Boston cop. There was also a federal law enforcement officer at 34 Fairview that night, Brian Higgins, a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, with whom both O'Keefe and Read were friendly. Karen Read was not only friendly with Brian Higgins, she had also been hitting on him for several weeks, also left out of Gretchen Voss's story. So that'll give you an idea. And all those details are important. But my thought is that Gretchen Voss was enrolled by the defense to write this narrative. And it certainly worked. It's the narrative that everyone sticks to very closely on both sides of the fence. But what's curious is in the filings, it said that Karen Read was, I can't remember the language they used, flirting with men, like not just one man, Brian Higgins. So I'm curious to know who else she was incommunicado with, but how serious it was. Who they were. Will they testify? Because Brian Higgins was, I changed my opinion a little bit about Higgins. At first I thought, well, he's on to her. But I thought that he was cautious and skeptical of her sudden, intense, love-bombing interest and was asking her a lot of questions the way a detective or a police officer would. And Karen Read was not into that. She just wanted to love bomb him and dance around the questions and say things that were vague. So I don't think there was ever really a future between Brian. She needed someone to have power over them. And Brian Higgins was not a good candidate to willfully submit and accept her vague answers and her lies or stories on face value, even if they were true. Some of them. Do I have anything else that I want to talk about before? So I think it's going to be I would think usually, the second trials are pared down. I'm curious if we're going to have Jessica Hyde and Ian Whiffen testify both. I mean, their testimony seemed to be a little redundant or doubled up. I'm curious if they're going to do that. I understand why, because it was very necessary to make it absolutely clear that the phone search that the defense claimed happened at 2:27 happened at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. But usually we see a tighter case second time around, much more polished, much more easy to digest. I'm hoping that Hank Brennan really pulls everything together on closing argument and shows the relevance. Also, I've heard from Maestro, my moderator, that if her car data comes in, it will show exactly where she is on a map when she opened the door, closed the door, put the car in reverse. And it will actually show her at 34 Fairview during the event. If they got a complete download of her car data, it will be devastating to her. It won't be one of these things that, well, here's her car, here, we can't account for this amount of time, but here she is here. It will show without a doubt. We saw that there was an event. She went backwards. She hit something last time. She did a 3-point turn. We saw that. But to see exactly what time she did each for certain, not approximated, and exactly where she was, I think will be devastating for Karen Read. But I think the most devastating statements will be her own statements. Contradicting statements, and Aidan Carney coming in. That is a blow to the defense. Get Aidan up on the stand. So you were first talking through an intermediary through an encrypted app. How did that go? Oh, that went well for a while. She was telling me, right? Remember how they're not supposed to know anything? It's not their job to solve the case. Well, Karen Read seemed pretty certain of who did it and feeding Aidan evidence that wasn't supposed to be released. And then having her lawyers use Aidan and their harassment of witnesses. I do not think if we get it all depends whether we can get a fair jury. That's the most important thing. Will Karen Read be a leaper? I've seen that before, Angela, that she'll leap like the defendant who leapt up and attacked the judge. That famous clip. I've heard her being described as a bunny boiler. I'm going to try to get a shirt with like a bunny boiler, Karen Read's picture on it up soon. But yeah. This has been I think it's an innocence fraud campaign that's just imploding. And it's really curious that Karen Read always talks about sunlight being the best disinfectant. And more truth. Yes, give me more truth. But the more truth that has come into this case, the more devastating it's been for Karen Read. Now, Michael Proctor has a hearing today where we should find out his fate, whether he's keeping his job or whether they're going to continue to investigate or prosecute, or there's some or he might lose his job. We'll find out. This is the last day today. Curious timing to release those statements. They've been releasing statements like this. I mean, it's not the first time that they've spoken out. They've been releasing statements like this to the public. I don't know how effective. Steve Scanlon, there's another one that's going to be super interesting. Let's compelling testimony from Steve Scanlon. Does anybody remember that? Turtle Boy did an interview with him. And he's like, well, how did you know that so-and-so was in the house? He's like, I heard it from you. I heard it from you. Oh, here we go. I think let's just review this and then we can call it a day. This video. Anybody remember this?
In the Boston Police Department?
I worked with him, yeah, just for a couple of years.
Okay. Are you still friends with him?
So this is Aiden Turtleboy Carney talking to Steve Scanlon.
You know what? Since this whole thing took place, I'll be honest with you, if I saw him prior to this whole thing, I'd see him maybe once every, I don't know, 5 years.
Okay.
If I was at a road race or something like that, I'd run into him. It wasn't like we called each other or anything like that. But then, prior to this, I haven't talked to him when this whole thing started. No.
Okay.
Because I'll be honest with you.
So let me set the scene. So here, Turtle Boy thinks he's got a dynamite interview with a former law enforcement officer who knows the characters involved, knows Brian Albert, and has knowledge of this cover up, that there was a cover up in the thin blue line, the blue wall of silence, and the thin blue line, all protecting the conspiracy of which there's no evidence ever happening. There's no evidence of John O'Keefe ever making it in the home. There's no evidence of John O'Keefe ever being moved. His body is certainly where he lands, he doesn't move from. No one saw him in the home that night. But this is the big interview with Steve Scanlon. And he was offered money by the defense that he thankfully returned. He did the right thing. He returned it. But all the scoops that Turtle Boy thinks he's going to get all came directly from his blog, meaning Karen Read's head and her attorney's innocence fraud campaign. So you can just hear his excitement. I got a barn burner of an interview. It's going to change everything.
I'm an honest person. This thing stinks.
What, the Karen Read thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
tell me about it.
in my own view, initially when this whole thing took place, no one saw an autopsy photo. No one saw anything. You read about it, he had a scrape on his arm, a bump in his head, or whatever. Then when you did it, you opened everyone's eyes, because I was like, this dude got beat up.
Right.
It appeared he got beat up. And that's all. I mean, I've been just following.
The Cheryl J coming in with the hot off the pressers. The federal appeal was just denied. Thanks, Cheryl. Awesome news. Awesome news.
And when you're out and about, everybody in the world's talking about it, and everybody has the same point of view you have.
Oh, I know.
It is what it is.
But people that are close to you have told me, and that's how I got your name, that you've known this was a beating for quite some time, and that you might have contacted the defense about it. Is that true?
That's correct.
Oh.
What I did was, here's what I did.
Who do you think told Aiden that? The defense. This comes directly from the defense. Hey, they got in touch with us, this Steve Scanlon. And this all comes out in the interview with Natalie Wawicki, Bernschneider, Bernschneider, where Karen Read was putting up, who is Steve Scanlon? And they said, well, why did you want to do that? Well, because you wanted to stir the pot. Going on his Facebook and getting pictures of him, Facebook stalking him as is Karen Read's habit.
And this whole thing took place. I said, this thing stinks.
Yeah.
Okay? An innocent person should not be blamed for something if they didn't do it.
Right.
And that's what I stand for.
Right.
So
Now,
I reached out to Karen Read.
You've spoken to Karen Read?
No, I have not. I reached out to her on Messenger.
Okay.
This was like a year or so, a long time ago, I don't know when it was.
Okay.
And I told her, I said, look, I'm reading this stuff, I'm looking at it. I didn't, if you need help with this, I'll give you help free of charge. I met with the attorneys, and then the attorney and the investigator. And when I met with them, I didn't know who they were looking at or what, you know what I mean? I didn't really know the focus of it. I didn't know the people involved.
It's like, I didn't know the people involved. I didn't know anything except what I read in your blog, which came from Karen Read's head. But here, this is the, Turtle Boy thinks he's got a scoop. But who said, hold on one sec. Sinclair Reed made the great point here. If we get to see Proctor's texts, exactly, through this federal investigation, which we haven't really heard the full story of, except that it was started by David Yannetti and Karen Read, why it was started and why this was done as a favor to Karen Read, why ARCA was working with only information given to them by Karen Read's defense team and asked for nothing from the Commonwealth. And then the defense picked up, they did $9,000 worth of work in that range. And then Karen Read's defense team picked up the $23,925 plus for ARCA's fraudulent investigation. What is the relationship between the federal investigation and Karen Read? Now, before the Attorney General, who just forgetting his name now, help me out. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. He just resigned. There was a woman who was the Attorney General who was very involved in innocence fraud and squashing the convictions of one guy who's extremely guilty of killing two brothers. And he just, as he has a claim in civil court for his money, he wants millions for his wrongful conviction. He just got found, he smashed his car into a nursery school at the side of the building. They had to have a GoFundMe. He was found with drugs in his car and guns, which he wasn't allowed to have. Right as he's looking for his big innocence fraud payout, because that's usually the motivation of these post-litigation innocence fraud campaigns. They want the wrongful conviction money when their conviction gets overturned for whatever reason, even if it's a technicality. And like Marty Tankleff and Andrew Cuomo, the Attorney General who looked at his case, said, He should in no way looked at, he's getting out on a technicality. We're not going to retry him, and he should not be looked at as innocent and deserves no money. That didn't stop him from suing everyone and getting $13.3 million. Okay, back to Steve Scanlon. So that woman was a big innocence fraudster, that attorney general, and Yannetti helped with her transition team. But we still don't know Josh Levy here. There it is, came to me. Josh Levy, we don't know the relationship between Josh Levy and the feds and why they did this for Karen Read. Why did they want to make it so easy why did they want to put pressure on the Commonwealth to drop the charges against Karen Read? Why were the federal investigators supporting a unrepentant, psychopathic, in my view, cop killer? It's just like hangs over this case. That's unanswered question.
Whatever. And when they did, I was like, I have to walk away from this. I'm sorry. It's a conflict. It is what it is. I wish I could, but I told them if I learned of anything, if I knew anything firsthand, they would know about it.
Okay, what made you decide to go to them? Just it didn't smell right?
No, I mean, the injuries.
The injuries, right. Had you seen the autopsy photos at the time?
I saw your stuff. I followed you morning to night. And I'll tell you.
Yeah, but didn't you go like last year sometime before I wrote about this?
Yes. But that was only because they talked about swollen eyes, a cut on his arm, and I'm like, maybe he got hit by a plow, or maybe he got beat up because I think they said like he was missing a shirt or whatever it was. It looked like a fight.
Okay.
And whatever it was, it looked to me like it was a fight.
Did they ask you to sign an affidavit or anything?
No. It was just a simple talk.
Okay.
It was just a simple conversation. It was only my opinion. That's all it was.
Okay.
My opinion. They had a different opinion. Not a different opinion. They believed there was something happened.
Oh.
Okay. As far as like a fight.
Okay.
Okay. And that was it. And then I left. That was it. We talked about my background, and how I knew Brian, how I knew other guys that we worked with, things like that. Very simple talk, and that was it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, I'll call you clowns. If I learn anything firsthand, you're going to know about it too.
Yeah, I'm just...
And I only say that because if it wasn't for you, the fucking story would have never made it.
Right.
It would have been dead.
Can I ask you, how did you know Colin Albert was in the house?
Who?
How did you know Colin Albert was in the house?
Probably through you. I don't even know Colin Albert.
No, but did you tell the attorneys that Colin Albert was?
That's the greatest part. How did you know Colin Albert was in the house? Probably through you. Did you guys all hear that? That's my favorite part. Because I read it in your blog. I read it in your blog. Through you and Karen and your lawyers. Let's hear it again. It's my favorite part.
We're going to know about it too.
Yeah, I'm just...
And I only say that because if it wasn't for you, the fucking story would have...
Okay.
Okay, and that was it, and then I left. That was it. We talked about my background, and how I knew Brian, how I knew other guys that we worked with, things like that. Very simple talk, and that was it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, I'll call you clowns. If I learn anything firsthand, you're going to know about it too.
Yeah, I'm just...
And I only say that because if it wasn't for you, the fucking story would have never made it.
Right.
It would have been dead.
Can I ask you, how did you know Colin Albert was in the house?
Who?
How did you know Colin Albert was in the house?
Probably through you. I don't even know Colin Albert.
This thing needs a laugh track. It really does. I don't even know Colin Albert. If I hear anything, if I read something on your blog, I'll definitely call you about it, because that's the only way, because none of this ever happened. That's the only way that I'm going to get any inside information is from your blog. which means it's coming directly from Karen Read's imagination and David Yannetti's imagination and Alan Jackson's imagination and Micro Dots, Richie Keough, and whoever else is on the Free Karen Read team's imagination. I'll definitely give you an inside scoop. Oh, I mean, just his hopes, if he wasn't making a video of himself walking down a road in an extreme state of distress after this interview, I don't know. I don't know what he was doing, because he must have been depressed. Hey, Tammie. RG, where is the Buy Me a Coffee tab? It's in, always in the description, episode description, every single time. I work hard on those episode descriptions. There's always anything I use in the show there's a link to it in the episode description. I hope you guys are using the show notes and looking at the filings yourselves and using it to springboard your own investigation, real investigation, not Steve Scanlon type investigation. Yeah, it's in the tab. Hold on 1 second. I'll get it for you, Tammie. Hold on 1 minute. How are we doing on our no? We're at no. Karen Read will not testify, 84%. So 15% think she will testify. I hope they're right. I hope she does testify. That would be amazing. Although we thought it was going to be amazing when Charlie Adelson testified, and he was just an arrogant bore with a ridiculous story. So, hold on, I'll get this for you. You can buy me a coffee, or you can send a donation via Venmo. That totally cuts out all middlemen to support the channel. Appreciate it. Hold on 1 second. Where am I? I think we're near the end of this masterful Steve Scanlon interview. Thank you, Tammie. I appreciate that. By the way, if you use that YouTube, right, YouTube takes a big chunk out of the super chats. It's like around half. Thank you, Tammie. But here's should we finish up with this Steve Scanlon?
Did you tell the attorneys that Colin Albert was in the house when you met with him?
Did I what?
Did you tell the attorneys that, or David Yannetti or whoever, when you didn't mention the name Colin Albert to them?
I didn't even know Colin Albert.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good, isn't it? That's one of my favorite things ever that Turtle Boy's ever done. I think maybe that interview. But they were looking. What's curious about that interview is that Karen Read, like I said, Natalie Bernschneider-Wawicki said she was putting out things on social media saying, who's Steve Scanlon, trying to stir the pot. But what's also curious about that is just the way that Turtle Boy is talking to Steve Scanlon. But you were there, and but you said you had this knowledge and that knowledge and blah, 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 blah. I just curious as to how the witnesses like Lucky Loughran was talked to, initially, Lucky Loughran, you heard Steve Scanlon say, well, I thought he maybe got hit by a plow, because that was Karen Read's first story. Then she switched to the big beat up Blue Wall of Silence story. I'm just curious, and I'd love to revisit how David Yannetti, speaking of the Proctors, David Yannetti met Lucky Loughran at Michael Proctor's wife's elementary school, where she teaches. Why was it necessary to meet? I mean, what was the point of that? It seemed like he was trying to intimidate the Proctors and put them on edge. And I feel like Lucky Loughran was given an offer he can't refuse, to testify favorably for us, or stick to your story and be a Michael Proctor, essentially, be public enemy number one, be a Jennifer McCabe. And not having the stomach for being a villain, he joined the Free Karen Read and said exactly what David Yannetti wanted him to say. I mean, I've never seen a defense team testify through their expert witnesses as much as this defense team. Alessi seems to craft completely these reports from Marie Russell, from Richard McNasty Green. I call him McNasty because he was drinking at McNasty's bar and falsely accused people of punching him when he was harassing the waitress and grabbing her wrist. And he had to take a plea deal in that case. We won't hear about that. But I feel there's a huge difference between their testimony first trial and voir dire first trial and this trial. And the difference is Robert Alessi. The language is different. The experiences that they note are different. I mean, just to go over this one more time. Remember, I hope I have this handy. Remember how Marie Russell said that she saw thousands of was it hundreds of thousands or thousands of dog bites she cared for? Thousands of dog bites. Anybody remember that? And then here she is in a piece about, hold on, I'll share it. Here she is in a piece about the hospital, California hospital, and dog bites are not mentioned. Shootings, stabbings, but no dog bites mentioned. Hold on, let me share it. This would be a good place to leave it. So here's Marie Russell in basically her heyday.
Y'all, look who this is. Look.
So there's a Free Karen reader recording this and adding her commentary.
This hospital's been here for over 100 years.
Look at
It's a level 1 trauma center. We get to see lots.
Did you just call her Dr. Marie Russell? Or is that just her accent? Let me hear it again.
This hospital's been here for over 100 years.
Look at
it's a level 1 trauma center.
Oh no, she calls her Marie. She calls her Marie.
See lots of patients that have had horrible things happen to them.
Dr. Marie Russell has been here for 13 years.
She's got this.
As an assistant professor of emergency medicine, young doctors learn from her in this real-life classroom.
Donald, she has a 2-centimeter stab wound. right to her upper mid back.
She's got two.
And also to her left suprascapular
Area.
Kitties, you're making me laugh. Kitties says they were very small dogs, hardly noticeable by the rest of the ER team. They were like snuffleupagus, those dog bites, only visible to Marie Russell, who could identify them using no methodology whatsoever. Dr. Marie Russell and her imaginary, fantastical dog bite stories.
And midline neck, posteriorly. Okay, let's check for anything else here. Behind the ears.
And this is her
Let's look at
13
her
years in. Look at
axilla.
how
We have a very large training program here in medicine, in surgery, and emergency medicine. There have been more emergency doctors trained from this program than anywhere else in the United States.
USC is so well respected that the U.S. Army sends its medics here to train.
And let's get a hemoglobin.
USC. Yeah, USC is respected. But she went from here to working in a prison hospital. That's not where they send their medics, the Army, to prison hospitals to train. And I haven't seen anything that shows that her interest in police dog bites, their bite and hold wounds, makes her a expert on identifying all kinds of dog bites of pets, house pets. Chloe was not a police dog, and she wasn't biting and holding. Eva says, Roberta, do you think all the Dateline, Nightline interviews will be allowed to come in? Yeah, they're coming in. That's my understanding. Am I wrong? I thought she ruled, yeah, they're all coming in. No? Am I behind? Did I misunderstand? I think they're all coming in. Vanity Fair, everything's coming. I think I know they went immediately to get the Ted Daniels interviews. So, yeah, it's been a very bad couple weeks for Karen Read. Ever since the ARCA bombshell, the momentum has been towards the Commonwealth. It can switch. That's the way it goes in these trials. Sometimes the Commonwealth has the momentum, but I would say the Commonwealth has never had the momentum like it has now. They've always been on the, can we make this second trial show, can we make this second trial show tunes? I don't know what you mean. Sure, if I can figure out what that means, I will. I say sure.
Globin type of cross match and the routine labs.
I think this was 2001 or 2002.
And we'll get ready for the next patient.
A heart attack victim.
You know, she just loves being the center of attention. She had an article written about her. She went right to the defense team. She says via an intermediary. I'm not even so sure. I don't know if I believe her story as to how she got in touch with the defense team. But she loves to be interviewed and noticed. Isn't it funny that she's the doctor that's being featured here? This is from 2002, the poster says.
Coming in.
Okay, who's doing airway over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year, doctors here treated almost 700 crash victims, 600 gunshot wounds,
She
and 400
is
stabbings.
And they want to
Have you seen
question
the lady with
if she's
multiple
capable or
stabbings?
not.
I'm not saying she's not capable of being an ER doctor, but that's quite different than having a methodology as to identifying dog bites. Remember, she's the one who said that there were times when someone couldn't communicate that they were bit by a dog, either because of language trouble or other reasons. I guess like they were unconscious, I don't know. And she had to identify it. And Hank Brennan asked her for one example of that. So my feeling is that's something Robert Alessi thought up. And she repeats it. She doesn't remember one time. one time, not 2 times, one time. She can't think of any of the time in the thousands of dog bites that she's dealt with, but it's so important to her to mention. Yeah, I mean, to mention it means that you were thinking of a time that happened. Do you get what I'm saying? So as you're writing your report and you're talking about methodology, you said there were times when I had identified that it was a dog bite, not some other kind of bite, not some other kind of injury. And the patient couldn't communicate because of language differences or something, some other reason. So I had to use my methodology of identifying dog bites. She can't think of one time. That shows that that was entirely made up by Robert Alessi. It's his imaginings of how a dog bite expert would work in treat wounds in a emergency room hospital. So anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Please hit the thumbs up, share this episode. It helps spread the word about innocence fraud. Support the O'Keefe family. Leave me a comment. And I will be back Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for listening.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and a witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mom. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet. I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mark. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet.